for having me. Very happy to be here. We welcome any comments on this paper. Title's Betting Against Beta, Demand for Lottery, co-authored with Turan, Bali, Stephen Brown, and Tang. So basically what we're looking at in the paper is this long-standing anomaly that actually Myron talked about yesterday, where empirically what we observe is the security market line is too flat. So high beta stocks generate negative alpha, low beta stocks generate positive alpha. And this is something that's been around for a long time. So first actually documented by Black, Jensen, and Scholes in 72, following McBeth 73. So this has been around for a long time, and we don't really have a satisfactory explanation for it yet. A recent paper titled Betting Against Beta by Frazzini and Peterson provided an explanation for this, or gave a potential explanation. Okay, so their explanation is that leverage constraints drive this phenomenon. So why would leverage constraints drive this phenomenon? Well, they basically say that if you're leverage constrained, okay, so pension funds, mutual funds, these large institutions usually can't use leverage. If they want to increase the expected return of their portfolio, the way they can do it is by buying high beta stocks. Okay, they can't lever up low beta stocks, they can't lever up unit beta stocks, but they can buy high beta stocks. Okay, this price pressure effectively increases the price of high beta stocks, decreasing the future returns of high beta stocks. So this is their explanation for what drives the betting against beta phenomenon, or the negative alpha generated by high beta stocks, the positive alpha generated by low beta stocks. So we're going to provide an alternative explanation, and then we're going to compare and contrast these two explanations and see which one is empirically more viable. So we propose lottery demand. Okay, basically, lottery demand is demand by investors who want lottery-like stocks. So why would this cause the betting against beta phenomenon? Well, a lottery stock is a stock that has a large probability, or a higher probability than other stocks, of realizing a large one-day up move, say. So a large short-term pop, basically. Okay? Lottery investors, and it's been documented in previous work that there are such investors out there, and that they do exert substantial pressure on the financial markets, on the U.S. equity market in particular. Okay? So lottery demanders, or lottery investors, are demanding this kind of stock. A portion of lottery, the lottery aspect of any stock, is going to be systematic. So insofar as this lottery demand results in, or lottery demand price pressure is predominantly exerted on high beta stocks, okay, we would expect that this lottery demand phenomenon pushes up the price of high beta stocks, depressing the future return of those stocks. So the mechanism is very similar in that there's our mechanism and Frazzini and Peterson's mechanism is very similar in that there is some sort of demand that's pushing up the price of high beta stocks, thus depressing the future returns. We claim it's lottery demand, and they claim it's leverage constraints. So there has been previous research, like I said. Bali, and Whitelaw show a very strong cross-sectional relation between lottery demand and future stock returns, negative relation. Kumar shows, uses some demographic data to show that exactly the same people who play the lottery tend to invest in lottery-like stocks. So this is basically what we're talking about graphically. We've got security market lines should have a slope equal to the market risk premium, right? What we find is that, and other studies find, is that the slope is much shallower. In fact, we find it to be slightly negative than the security slope of than the market risk premium. And we get negative alpha for high beta stocks, therefore, and positive alpha for low beta stocks. So this is what we're trying to explain. So let me jump to the end, give you our main results, and then I'll walk you through as many of the tables as I can get through. Okay, so first of all, we find that lottery demand explains the betting against beta phenomenon. So when we control for lottery demand, the phenomenon goes away. Okay, no other variable that we look at explains the betting against beta phenomenon, including variables that capture sensitivity to funding liquidity, which is supposed to explain the leverage constraint story. Okay, so how do we do this? We use bivariate portfolio analysis, like I said, controlling for lottery demand. I guess I should first say, we measure lottery demand by max, which is the average of the top 5 daily returns in the given month. So this measure comes from Bali, White Law, which is kind of the original lottery demand paper. So bivariate portfolio analysis, when we control for max, betting against beta disappears, controlling for anything else, the phenomenon persists. Following Bethe regressions, we find that when we include max in the model, in the regression specification, we actually find a positive and significant coefficient on beta, the magnitude of which is very close to the slope of the secure or to the market risk premium. Okay, so basically after controlling for max, and we'll see if we don't include max in the model, we get insignificant relation between beta and future stock returns. When we include max in the model, we get a slope coefficient on beta that is very consistent with what we would think of the market risk premium as being. And then when we look at the orthogonal component of beta to max, that does not generate the betting against beta phenomenon. So no matter how we approach this, controlling for max explains the betting against beta phenomenon. So now we want to further check that lottery demand is in fact the channel that generates this phenomenon. So we do this in, well, a few ways. First, if lottery demand generates the betting against beta phenomenon, the necessary condition is that there's a that lottery demand-based price pressure falls predominantly on high beta stocks. Okay, so to test this, we just test the cross-sectional correlation between beta and max. And in fact, as we would expect, beta and max are positively correlated. The correlation is about 0.3 in the average month. Okay? So we get this disproportionate lottery demand-based price pressure on high beta stocks. Then we test, we divide our sample into 2 sets of months. Okay, the months where the lottery demand-based price pressure is above, or the correlation between beta and max is above 0.3, above the median. So these are months where the disproportionate price pressure or lottery-based price pressure on high beta stocks is very strong. And then months where this cross-sectional correlation is low, or where lottery-based price pressure is approximately equally exerted on low beta stocks and on high beta stocks. And it's only in these months where lottery demand price pressure falls predominantly on high beta stocks that the betting against beta phenomenon exists. In the other months, it does not exist. Then we look at institutional holdings. So lottery demand is primarily a retail phenomenon, okay? Whereas the leverage constraint story is primarily an institutional phenomenon. So if the lottery demand explanation is true, we would expect the betting against beta phenomenon to be strongest among stocks that are not widely held by institutions. And if the leverage constraint story is true, we would expect the betting against beta phenomenon to be strongest amongst stocks that are widely held by institutions. And obviously we find that the betting against beta phenomenon is very strong among stocks that are not held by institutions, but doesn't exist among stocks that are widely held by institutions. And then we look at aggregate lottery demand, and we find, I forget what I think we've basically taken this out of the paper at this point. But we find that these months, these high correlation months, tend to be high aggregate lottery demand months. So I'm not going to present any results on that. It may still be in the online appendix, I forget. So then we generate a lottery demand factor. Okay, so this is kind of the third set of results. We generate a lottery demand factor. Factor is standard factor construction. Okay, and we find that this factor, which we call Fmax, when we throw this into a factor model, it once again explains the betting against beta phenomenon. It explains the alpha of the high beta minus low beta portfolio. And in fact, it explains the alpha of basically all of the decile portfolios. It also explains the alpha of Fresini and Peterson's bad factor. So this is just their factor returns that were downloaded from their website. Once we include our F-max factor in the factor model, their factor no longer generates abnormal returns. And going the other way, though, the betting against beta factor, Fresini and Peterson's factor, can't explain our lottery demand factor. So let me get to some tables. I'm going to skip. The sample is basically 1963 from present, crisp sample, excluding $5 stocks priced less than $5. The main variables we look at are beta, which is calculated from a standard CAPM regression model using 1 year of daily return data. We also look at several other ways of calculating beta, including the way Fresini and Peterson do it. There's no, how we calculate beta has no substantial impact on our results. We look at lottery demand, average of the 5 highest daily returns in a month. You can use 4, 3, 2, it doesn't really matter. And monthly excess stock returns, we adjust the returns following summary for delistings. Basically, the stock delists, we assign it a return based on its delisting code. But whether we do that or not doesn't affect the results either. So, several control variables, firm characteristics. I'll just run through these: market cap, book to market. I'm not even going to run through these risk measures. They're all calculated very standard. The ones that are not standard are these funding liquidity measures. So these are sensitivity to funding liquidity. So firm level. So TED spread sensitivity is basically the beta relative to the TED spread. Sensitivity to TED spread volatility, similar. And sensitivity to the T-bill rate. And sensitivity to financial sector leverage. So these are supposed to account for the funding liquidity or the leverage constraint story. Okay? So our sample, as I said. So here's the starting point for the paper. If we sort stocks on beta, where's my, there it is. We sort stocks on beta. The returns of the portfolio, if the CAPM holds, we would expect returns to be monotonically increasing, okay, and we would expect the difference to be positive and significant. And of course, consistent with lots of previous research, we get a statistically insignificant high minus low average return for our 10-1 beta portfolio. Okay? And the alphas of this portfolio, if we look, the low beta portfolio generates positive and significant alpha of 22 basis points a month. The high beta portfolio generates negative and significant alpha of 29 basis points a month, and the difference of 51 basis points, t-statistic was 2.5, is highly statistically significant. So this result here, this last result, is basically what we're trying to explain in this paper. Okay? So, I can show you average firm characteristics. Bottom line, max, so beta, is highly cross-sectionally related to max, as we can see, to lottery demand, and to several other firm characteristics, measures of risk, and measures of funding liquidity sensitivity. So I'm not going to go through all the details on this. Just to give you a sense of how strong the lottery demand phenomenon is. If we sort portfolios on max, the high minus low max portfolio generates 115 basis points a month loss, very high t-statistic. The 4-factor alpha of that portfolio is even higher. The t-statistic goes to 9. Okay, so this is a very, very strong phenomenon in the equity markets, this lottery demand phenomenon. Okay? So, first thing we do to test our hypothesis is we perform bivariate portfolio analysis. We sort all stocks first by the control variable, either lottery demand max or book to market size, whatever, all the other control variables. Then sort by beta into deciles by beta, and we see whether after controlling for the first variable, the betting against beta phenomenon still exists. So, doing so, sorting first on max, then on beta. So this is the average of the decile 1 beta portfolios across all deciles of max. Likewise, the average of the decile 1, decile 10 beta across all deciles of max. Okay, so a 10 by 10 sort, each of these represents a beta decile across the top. See that the low beta decile generates 70 basis points per month in average excess return, and the high beta decile only 68 basis points. The difference after controlling for max, 2 basis points, or alpha of 14 basis points, is statistically indistinguishable from 0. Wow. Nothing else explains the betting against beta phenomenon. Okay? Market cap, book to market, momentum, nothing else. We go to measures of risk, nothing else explains the betting against beta phenomenon, and then measures of funding, liquidity, sensitivity, none of those explain the betting against beta phenomenon. Now we look at following Macbeth regressions. Okay, and I don't include I have the full results on the next slide, but the coefficient on beta in following Macbeth regressions, okay, when we include firm characteristics, this model includes firm characteristics and risk. This one adds funding, liquidity, sensitivity measures. Coefficient on beta is statistically indistinguishable from 0 and much lower than the market risk premium, or than our estimates of the market risk premium. Same exact specifications, except we add max in. The coefficients increase very substantially. When we have both firm characteristics and risk in the model, the average coefficient is of 43 basis points a month, 47 basis points a month per unit of market risk. Is very consistent with what we expect the market risk premium to be. Okay, here's the full result in case we need to see them as part of the discussion. So, bivariate independent sort results, I'm just going to run through this because I'm running out of time. Results are the same. After controlling for max, betting against beta does not exist. Orthogonal portion of beta to max, the betting against beta phenomenon does not exist. So, no matter how we control for max, okay, all methodologies show that it explains the betting against beta phenomenon. So, going the other way, that beta does not explain the lottery demand phenomenon. So now, as I said, we divide our sample into months with high correlation between max and beta, and months with low correlation between max and beta. High correlation months are months where lottery demand price pressure is predominantly exerted on high beta stocks. Low correlation months are months where lottery demand price pressure is approximately equally exerted on high beta and low beta stocks. And if we look at the high correlation months, okay, we see that the high minus low beta portfolio generates 72 basis points of alpha, very highly statistically significant. In the low correlation months, months where the lottery demand price pressure is equally exerted on high and low beta stocks, betting against beta phenomenon doesn't exist. Okay? So this, we think, supports our claim that lottery demand is in fact the channel. If we go the other way, lottery demand exists in all months. Okay, so regardless of the correlation between lottery demand and beta, the lottery demand phenomenon is strong in all months. Now we look at institutional holdings. We sort first by institutional holdings, then by beta, and we see that in low institutional holding stocks, or among low institutional holding stocks, the betting against beta phenomenon is very strong. 191 basis points a month in each of the first 2 deciles of institutional holdings. Getting weaker and weaker and weaker. Institutional holding deciles 7 through 10, betting against beta phenomenon disappears. So this is consistent with a lottery demand story, which is a retail phenomenon, inconsistent with a leverage constraint story, which is supposed to be concentrated among institutional investors, or driven by institutional investors. Lottery demand, just to show you, lottery demand is much stronger in low institutional holding stocks than in high institutional holding stocks. Then we generate this lottery demand factor, standard factor forming procedure. I've got to run through this really quickly, but the main result is we start the 4-factor alpha of the high minus low beta portfolio of 51 basis points a month. We saw this right at the beginning. This is what we're trying to explain. We throw the passed off standby liquidity factor in. Doesn't really explain much, okay? That's here. If we throw our Fmax factor in, our lottery demand factor, the results of this high minus low beta portfolio, the abnormal returns disappear. Okay, so throwing in this lottery demand factor explains the abnormal returns of the betting against beta phenomenon. If we look at the alphas of each of the individual decile portfolios, not only do we explain the high minus low, this is from the previous slide, but we explain the alpha of each of the deciles. There's a few in here that are significant. But most importantly, we explain the alpha of both the low decile portfolio and the high decile portfolio. Okay? So, similarly, if we use on the left side of the regression, instead of the returns of the 10-1 portfolio, the bad factor returns for Zini and Peterson's bad factor returns, we see that we explain the returns of their bad factor with our lottery demand factor. So their factor generates 54 basis points a month. When we include our lottery demand factor, only 17 basis points a month. Okay, the opposite is not true. Going the other direction, if we include the bad factor, it does not explain the returns of our lottery demand factor. So this I'm going to skip. Basically, we check whether lottery demand or whether max captures sensitivity to this lottery demand factor, and we don't find a risk story. Basically, we find that this is much more of a behavioral story. I'm not going to do this. So in conclusion, basically, we find that the lottery demand or that the betting against beta phenomenon is driven by lottery demand, but the opposite is not.
So thanks a lot for asking me to discuss the paper. It's a great pleasure to do so. The paper is really nice. It's a bit long to read, so the version that I had already more than 90 pages. By now we have more than 100 pages, more than 30 tables. So it's really a challenge for a discussant. There's a lot of things that you can talk about. But bottom line is, this is an empirical analysis based on a simple intuition. And they use a very powerful, simple proxy, MAX5, that has been shown to negatively predict equity returns. And what they do is, empirically, they show once they control for this MAX5, betting against beta returns go away. But the opposite is not true. So there's no doubt about these results. I've replicated them in my own data. It's true empirically that if you put max in a regression with betting against beta, the returns go away, but the opposite is not true. So that's true. However, I still think the claim that it's either betting against beta or lottery demand, it's much stronger in the paper than in the presentation, is not necessarily true. And I don't think that this is a bad thing, because there are many reasons why you can think that both stories complement each other, right? So individual investors are, in fact, also in Lass's paper, the ones that are most prone to betting against beta effects, right? And you could think of individual investors being constrained, and exactly because of being constrained, buying lottery stocks, right? There's a paper by Malcolm Baker about fixed benchmark effects, similar to what Myron Schultz said yesterday. That also is not exclusive of the lottery stories, and also other papers that are written betting against beta. Also, I think that the statement that no other firm characteristics or measures of risk explain the effect is a bit strong, because as we will see, max is just a composite of some of these other risk measures, right? So it's true, max is a very smart, clever, simple empirical proxy that combines many of these features, but still I find it a bit strong to say other risks like skewness have nothing to do with lottery demand, because we know that's actually the heart of lottery demand, thinking about skewness, right? And then there are some interesting patterns that we've just heard, that lottery demand falls disproportionately on high beta stocks. That happens when the correlation between beta and max is high, and that happens when aggregate lottery demand is high. All of this made me just think I need to understand what max actually measures, because that's not really in the paper and also not in the other paper. So I took the data that I had, which is a bit different because it's crisp composite optometrics match, so it's only 5,000 firms, but still a lot of data from 96 to 2014, and I sort from high max stocks to low max stocks, quintile portfolios, and you see the pattern is the same as Scott said, and it's a significant 4-factor alpha that you get by sorting on max. So that's consistent with the story of lottery demand. But the question is, what is max actually measuring? So what you can think of is you have the daily return, the vector of daily returns over the past month. What do other people do with this vector, right? So they compute, for example, measures of volatility or idiosyncratic volatility, by taking the standard deviation, the residual variance with respect to the cap M, Farmer French factors or whatsoever. And if you do that and compare that to max, you get a median cross correlation of 0.84 to 0.90. There is some time variation. Economically, if you compare quintile portfolios sorted on max or these volatility measures, the time series correlation is huge, 0.96. But there's an important additional feature of max, and it is that it really gives you 1.2 to 2.6% extra per year, although it's highly correlated with these volatility measures. So there is additional information in there, in max. And that obviously comes from the tails. And given that you're here at ETAM already, I'd like to refer to Aurelio's paper. He has a paper on realized skewness and the predictability of equity returns. And I'm saying that max is exactly also capturing this effect, right? Because think of max, and let's complement the max with an just analog min measure, where you take from the past month the minimum 5 returns and take the average, okay? And then you do the same thing again. I did a bivariate sort as Scott, and what I did was I was sorting from high to low min measures, and then computing the returns betting against max, basically. Okay? And you see there's a strong structure, very strong structure, in the predictability or the way that max predicts equity returns across different min portfolios. So that is the additional predictability of max is, for example, likely to come from skewness that max captures, but volatility does not. Okay? So all that I'm trying to say with this simple example is that it's true. You can interpret max as a proxy for lottery demand because it is a combined trade on volatility and skewness, a key feature of lottery stocks. But I think it's still too strong to say other risks do not measure because max is really a composite of these risks. Okay? Instead, I would find it much more interesting if you would talk more about how max relates to these other measures and how that actually feeds through to the interaction between beta and max, right? Because based on my example from before, I would say, well, it's likely that beta and max both capture the volatility component by definition, but only max captures the skew component, right? And that's why it makes sense that max contains more predictability than volatility, and probably also because of beta, but that's hard to say because beta is a covariance measure. There's also a correlation in there. The question is, where does this come from? So there might be different answers to that, but mine, and I have to admit biased view because it's based on my own recent work, is that actually skewness is behind all of these results. And I've just finished with colleagues a paper that is exactly looking at low-risk anomalies and their relation to high-risk skewness, as pretty much in the spirit of what Myron Schultz said yesterday, but the point is, we're saying we have an asset pricing model where skewness is priced in the sense of Krauss-Litzenberg and Harvey-Sadiq. In that world, we have firms that are subject to credit risk, and what happens is therefore that we have a model where we can really look at how a firm's equity return distribution looks like in terms of its idiosyncratic moments and its co-moments. And what we can show is that high cap and beta stocks are prone to overestimating market risk because they do not take into account skewness, and we can show that actually the low returns to high beta stocks are just there because they ignore the effect of co-skewness. Okay, so just give you an idea of what I'm trying to say is that if you sort based on skewness first, or if you do a bivariate sort based on skewness, and then on betas we see that this is the standard betting against beta plot. So high beta, low beta, and betting against beta is significant. Once we control for skewness and compute betting against beta from the high skew to low skew portfolios, we see that there is a strong pattern, right? Betting against beta works only if for stocks or most for stocks which have high negative ex-ante skewness. That's consistent with skewness being priced. Same is true for idiosyncratic volatility. So the question, and I wanted to do this anyway for our paper as a robustness check, is what happens if you put max in there. So I have a measure of ex-ante skewness and then bet against max, so the lottery demand scoring. And what you see, the pattern is much less pronounced as compared to beta or idiosyncratic volatility. But still, between the first and the fifth skew portfolio, there is a significant difference of 70 basis points in terms of four-factor alpha. So that means, to me, in my interpretation, max is really a clever factor that also captures some of the skew effect on prices, but there's also some more general skewness effects going on in asset prices. Okay? So that is the main story of what I'm trying to say is, I think the paper would benefit from better giving us an idea of what are actually the effects going on behind that. Not just putting max into a regression and say the returns go away, rather say why is it happening. Okay? And there are some, just a few things to mention. I find actually the time patterns that you skipped find interesting, the relation between aggregate lottery demand and when betting against beta works. I find that it's interesting. It's again actually perfectly consistent with aggregate lottery demand effectively measuring market skewness. When market skewness is extreme, that affects like how much beta deviates from a skew adjusted beta, and that's when betting against beta should work best. I was also just wondering about alternative max specifications because I've been checking like many different setups, also looking at monthly data, back a year, and then look at the top month, 3 month, all that works. So it's really consistent. I'm just not sure what the best is. The reason because I'm saying that, why I'm saying that is, I think the kind of understanding how beta relates to max would also be easier if you really would have the same return vector that you build it from, right? So you really take the same 200 days for the beta and for the max computation, you can better compare it. And it does work also using the max with 200 days, okay? Some minor comments, but overall I really like the paper. It would benefit a lot from making it more concise, less than 105 pages and less than 30 tables. A lot of this in the appendix, of course. Maxis is very simple but very powerful in pure measure, and it is consistent with the idea of lottery demand. I just think, or at least I would like them to show a bit more what is the relation between max, beta, and the other risk measures in aggregate lottery demand. Yeah.